If you review the third paragraph, you'll see that this property clause legally protects both parties, Nathan explained as I maintained a polite smile across our formal dining room. My husband Marcus sat beside me, refilling his glass with the Cabernet I'd selected for this dinner celebrating our latest property acquisition. His colleagues listened attentively as Nathan outlined our investment portfolio. Another property, another victory dinner, another evening of Marcus claiming credit for my financial strategy. Rebecca was concerned about over-leveraging, Marcus said, his arm draped possessively around my shoulders, but I assured her that Seattle's real estate market is bulletproof. The irony was palpable. I'd built my first property portfolio before meeting Marcus. I'd structured the entire investment strategy they now praised him for. I'd graduated top of my class in finance while Marcus had barely passed business administration. Women. Always so cautious with investments, remarked Connor from the bank, his gaze lingering inappropriately on my dress. I sipped my water and maintained my composed expression. 8 years of marriage had perfected my performance as the supportive wife who supposedly needed her husband's financial guidance. Rebecca's still learning the complexities of high-level investing, Marcus continued, his grip tightening. She's making progress, though. Nathan, our attorney, briefly caught my eye. He knew the truth. He'd seen the documentation, the structure I'd created, the capital I'd brought to the marriage. But professional discretion kept him silent as Marcus spun tales of his supposed financial acumen. Another property added to the Marcus Cole real estate empire, Kyle toasted. I raised my glass, focusing on the crystal stem. The phrase, Marcus Cole real estate empire, resonated strangely tonight. Something about Nathan's presentation had triggered an alarm in my mind. After our guests departed and the catering staff cleared the final dishes, Nathan approached me discreetly. Rebecca, could you sign some final paperwork? He asked, his voice professionally neutral, but his eyes conveying something unspoken. In Marcus's office with the door closed, Nathan's demeanor shifted. I thought you should see these, he said, quietly, sliding a folder across the desk. They came through my office yesterday. Marcus claimed you'd already discussed them. Opening the folder, my confusion transformed into shock as I examined the documents. Property transfer forms. My name systematically removed from our real estate holdings, replaced solely with Marcus's. The paperwork dated back 6 months. Executed. Gradually, property by property. He said you agreed to consolidate for tax purposes, Nathan explained. The room seemed to tilt. My name, my properties, my financial security, all being quietly, methodically erased. I wouldn't normally show a client documents requested by their spouse, but given our professional history. Nathan didn't complete his sentence. He didn't need to. He'd handled my finances before I met Marcus. He understood exactly what I had, contributed to this marriage and what I stood to lose. Thank you, I replied, my voice remarkably steady. I appreciate your professional courtesy. The final transfers haven't been processed yet. There's still time to address this. I'll handle it, I stated. Please don't mention this conversation to Marcus. After Nathan's departure, I sat alone, surrounded by framed photos of Marcus with business associates, receiving awards, standing in front of properties I had found, financed, and managed. I opened my laptop and began examining our accounts. The extent of his betrayal unfolded before me through electronic statements and transfer records. For months, Marcus had been systematically removing my name from everything I had built. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Finishing up with the guys, taking them for drinks, don't wait up. I set the phone down and stared at the folder. The trembling in my hands had ceased. The shock was receding, replaced by something colder and more calculated. The mask I'd worn for years had hidden something even from myself, a core of steel that had quietly observed every dismissal, every slight, every act of disrespect. It was time to stop pretending, It was time to start planning. I spent the night methodically analyzing our financial entanglements. What had begun as shock hardened into focused determination with each new discovery. Marcus had been planning this for at least a year. Emails with divorce attorneys, private bank accounts I never knew existed, and conversations with a realtor about investment properties perfect for a bachelor. By dawn, I had compiled a comprehensive log of his deception. I hadn't slept, but adrenaline kept me sharp. When Marcus finally stumbled home at 7 a.m., I was already dressed for work, calmly sipping coffee at the kitchen island. Late night, I remarked, not a question. Client relations, he mumbled, heading straight for the espresso machine. Those guys can drink. But we closed the Peterson deal. Another lie. The Peterson deal had been finalized weeks ago. By me. Congratulations, I said, watching him over the rim of my cup. I was looking at our portfolio last night. The Westlake property is showing impressive appreciation. Marcus paused mid-sip, his eyes narrowing slightly. You were reviewing our portfolio? Just catching up, I replied lightly. I want to understand our investments better. Don't worry about all that, he dismissed, his relief obvious. That's why you have me. That was the thing about Marcus. His confidence in my financial ignorance was so complete that he never questioned my sudden interest. As he showered, I texted my assistant Zoe. Emergency meeting with Nathan at 10. Clear my schedule. At my office downtown, a consulting firm I'd built before meeting Marcus but now operated under the radar as a hobby business. I locked the door for my meeting with Nathan. The transfers are technically legal with the power of attorney you granted. Him, Nathan explained grimly. But we can fight this as fraud. I don't want to fight it, I replied, sliding a flash drive across the desk. I want to beat it. This contains everything I found. Nathan raised an eyebrow. I sense you have a plan. I need a shell company, I said. Completely untraceable. To me? And I need 2 months to execute everything. Rebecca, Nathan cautioned. Whatever you're planning will be completely legal, I finished. Just like Marcus's transfers were completely legal, I'm simply going to play by his rules. I outlined my strategy. Nathan's expression shifted from concern to reluctant admiration. It's ruthless, he admitted finally. But brilliant. Just like removing your wife's name from property she paid for, I replied. Set up the meeting with Winston Investments. I need to move quickly. That evening, I arrived home early and prepared Marcus's favorite meal. When he walked in, I greeted him with a kiss and a glass of scotch. What's the occasion? He asked, suspicious but pleased. I've been thinking about what you said, I replied. About me learning more about investing. You're right. I should take more interest. His smile was patronizing. That's my girl. I was wondering if you could explain some of these documents, I continued, gesturing to papers spread across the coffee table. I found them in your office. His face went pale as he recognized the property transfer forms. Rebecca, I can explain. Please do, I said calmly. Explain why you're removing my name from properties I purchased. Explain why you've been speaking with divorce attorneys. Explain why you're looking at bachelor pads with Linda from Cornerstone Realty. Marcus's expression hardened. You went through my emails. Just catching up, I echoed his dismissive tone. What exactly are you planning, Marcus? Business restructuring. He deflected, but his confidence was slipping. For tax purposes. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it, I challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're planning to leave me with nothing. Marcus set down his glass, strategy shifting. Look, we've had a good run, but let's be realistic. I built this portfolio. My connections. My strategy. There. It was the truth behind the mask. I see, I said, nodding slowly. And what about the initial capital? My capital. A small contribution, he dismissed. I multiplied it tenfold. I stood, gathering the papers. Well, thank you for clarifying. I appreciate your honesty. Confusion flashed across his face at my calm reaction. That's it? He asked. No drama? I smiled thinly. What would be the point? You've made your position clear. As I walked away, he called after me. This doesn't have to be messy, Rebecca. Be reasonable, and we can both walk away happy. I paused at the doorway. Oh, I intend to be very reasonable, Marcus. Very reasonable indeed. He had no idea that the game had already begun. The next morning, I awoke to find Marcus already gone. Unusual for a Saturday. A text notification explained his absence. Meeting with Kyle about restructuring. Back tonight. Perfect timing. I called Zoe immediately. Is everything ready? I asked. Winston Investments confirmed the 11 a.m. meeting, she replied. And I have the documents you requested. And Marcus? GPS shows him at Kyle's country club. They have a tea time at 10. I smiled. Marcus's predictability was becoming my greatest asset. 2 hours later, I sat across from Eliza Winston, founder of Winston Investments and one of the few female investment bankers I trusted implicitly. Your husband's quite thorough, she observed, reviewing Marcus's financial maneuvers. But not as clever as he thinks. These shell companies have obvious patterns. Can you trace everything? I asked. Eliza nodded. Given time. But Rebecca, you should know, the offshore account in Belize has nearly $3 million, money that never appeared in your joint finances. The revelation stung less than it should have. I'd suspected something similar after discovering discrepancies in our investment returns. That's why I need Artemis, I said, referring to the shell company Nathan had established for me yesterday. Everything needs to flow through it, untraceable to me. And legally defensible, added Nathan, who had joined us. We're walking a fine line here. So is secretly funneling money offshore while planning to divorce your wife, I countered. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm simply protecting what's rightfully mine. By afternoon, Artemis Financial Consulting existed on paper, backed by Winston Investments through 3 separate holding companies. My plan was taking shape. Back home, I made a show of researching investment strategies online where Marcus would see my browsing history. When he returned from golf, I approached him with feigned excitement. I've been thinking about investment opportunities, I said, deliberately using simplistic terminology. What about cryptocurrency? My friend Emma's husband made a fortune in Bitcoin. Marcus laughed condescendingly. Those are high-risk gambles, not real investments. Stick to understanding our current portfolio first. You're right, I agreed, appearing chastened. Maybe you could walk me through it? Help me understand the big picture? His ego sufficiently stroked, Marcus spent the next hour explaining his investment strategy, one I had originally developed and implemented. I nodded attentively, asking carefully crafted naive questions that prompted him to reveal more details about our holdings. What about those new forms from Nathan? I asked innocently. The ones removing my name? Marcus tensed momentarily before his smooth explanation. It's just consolidation for the upcoming Reynolds acquisition. Having multiple names complicates the lending process. Of course, I nodded. That makes perfect sense. His relief was palpable. Once we close that deal, we'll restructure everything properly. Translation. Once we close that deal, I'll file for divorce. I was thinking, I ventured, maybe I could help with some of the preliminary work. Learn the process? Marcus considered. This, clearly calculating the benefits of having me handle tedious paperwork against the risk of me understanding too much. Actually, that's not a bad idea. You could organize the documentation for the Reynolds property. Nothing complicated, just sorting papers. I'd love that. I smiled. The perfect picture of an eager-to-learn wife. That night, while Marcus slept, I photographed every document in his home office, paying special attention to the Reynolds acquisition. a commercial property worth nearly $7 million. According to the paperwork, Marcus planned to close the deal in 6 weeks through Cole Investments, one of his shell companies from which he'd carefully removed my name. By morning, I had sent everything to Eliza and Nathan with a simple message. Target identified. Proceed with Phase 1. The following Monday, I took a calculated risk and initiated a seemingly innocent conversation with Marcus. I'm thinking of taking a more active role in my consulting business, I mentioned over breakfast. Some interesting opportunities have come up. Marcus nodded absently. That's nice, honey. Just don't let it interfere with our social obligations. My consulting business, which actually generated 6-figure revenues he knew nothing about, had always been dismissed as my cute hobby. Of course not, I assured him. Just keeping my mind active. As he left for work, I called Zoe. It's time. Transfer the first installment to Artemis and contact Reynolds directly. I had 6 weeks to execute my plan before Marcus did. Mr. Reynolds will see you now, the receptionist announced, leading me into a spacious corner office overlooking Seattle's waterfront. Robert Reynolds, a silver-haired man in his 60s, stood to greet me. Ms. Chen from Artemis Financial, a pleasure to meet you. I'd deliberately used my maiden name for this meeting. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, Mr. Reynolds. Your proposal was intriguing, he replied, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Though I was under the impression that Cole Investments had exclusivity on this property. That's what I'd like to discuss, I said, opening my portfolio. Cole Investments has certain vulnerabilities I believe you should be aware of before proceeding. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined select aspects of Marcus's financial structure, enough to raise serious concerns without revealing my connection. These shell companies, Reynolds noted, they're legally established, but the pattern suggests potential tax complications. Exactly, I confirmed. Should the IRS take interest, any property transaction could be frozen indefinitely. Reynolds leaned back, studying me. What's your interest in this, Ms. Chen? You're not just a concerned citizen. Artemis represents investors interested in the property, I explained smoothly. We're prepared to offer 5% above Cole's bid, with a guaranteed 30-day closing and none of these complications. That's an attractive offer, Reynolds admitted. But I've given my word to Marcus Cole. I placed a folder on his desk. These are the financial disclosures for Artemis. Complete transparency. Compare them to what Cole provided. Reynolds opened the folder, scanning the contents. His expression shifted subtly. Exactly the reaction I'd anticipated. Cole's disclosures were less comprehensive, he acknowledged. We value transparency, Mr. Reynolds. All we ask is fair consideration. Back at my office, I briefed Nathan on the meeting. Reynolds is interested but loyal to his word, I explained. We need leverage. Nathan's expression was troubled. Rebecca, this is aggressive. If Marcus discovers, he won't, I interrupted. Not until it's too late. Has Eliza traced the offshore funds? Yes, Nathan confirmed reluctantly. The money came from the Westlake property refinance. Marcus claimed that capital went into the Bryant Street development. I nodded, another piece falling into place. Which means Bryant Street is undercapitalized. Perfect! That evening, Marcus was in an unusually good mood, bringing home champagne and takeout from my favorite restaurant. What are we celebrating? I asked, maintaining my oblivious facade. Just us, he said, kissing me with calculated affection. I've been busy with work, and I wanted to make it up to you. The performance would have been convincing if I hadn't seen the divorce consultation on his calendar that morning, information Zoe had discovered through a contact at his office. How's the Reynolds acquisition progressing? I asked innocently. His smile faltered momentarily. How did you know about that? I adopted a confused expression. You mentioned it last week, when explaining the consolidation paperwork? Right. He recovered quickly. It's proceeding well. Should close within the month. Another lie. The closing date was 6 weeks out. That's wonderful, I replied. I'm so proud of everything you're accomplishing. His ego sufficiently stroked, Marcus launched into elaborately false details about the deal's complexities. I listened attentively, noting each fabrication while appearing suitably impressed. After dinner, he received a call and stepped onto the patio. Through the glass door, I could see his expression darken. When he returned, his mood had visibly shifted. Problem at work? I asked. Nothing serious, he dismissed. Just a complication with a property. Later, I received a text from Eliza. Reynolds requested additional meeting. Phase 1 successful. The next morning, Marcus left for the office earlier than usual. I waited 15 minutes before calling Zoe. What happened with the Bryant Street property? I asked. Building inspection failed yesterday afternoon, she reported. Major structural issues identified. The city's halting construction until resolved. I smiled. The routine inspection I'd arranged through Winston Investments' connections at the city planning office had revealed actual problems. I'd simply ensured they wouldn't be overlooked. Is the Reynolds meeting confirmed? I asked. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., Zoe confirmed. And Marcus has scheduled an emergency meeting with his investors for today at 11. Perfect. The Bryant Street crisis would force Marcus to explain to his investors why their money hadn't been properly allocated. Meanwhile, I would be presenting Reynolds with a clean, complication-free offer. Contact Eliza, I instructed. Time for Phase 2. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Working late. Don't wait up. He had no idea how true that was. The next morning, I arrived at Reynolds' office 10 minutes early, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that projected confidence and competence. My presentation materials were meticulously prepared: financial projections, development, plans, and a certified letter of credit from Winston Investments. Ms. Chen, Reynolds greeted me, his demeanor noticeably warmer than our first meeting. Please, come in. I noticed 2 additional people in his office, a woman in her 30s. I recognized as Reynolds' daughter and successor, Catherine, and an older man I assumed was their attorney. Thank you for this opportunity, I said, setting up my presentation. I've prepared comprehensive documentation addressing your concerns. Before we begin, Reynolds said, I should inform you that Marcus Cole contacted me last night. He was quite distressed to learn another party was interested in the property. I maintained a neutral expression. Competition is the nature of business, Mr. Reynolds. Indeed, Catherine interjected, especially when that competition exposes concerning patterns. For the next 40 minutes, I presented Artemis Financial's proposal, a clean offer with transparent funding sources, regulatory compliance documentation, and development plans that aligned with Reynolds' vision for the property. One thing puzzles me, Reynolds said as I concluded. Your knowledge of Cole Investments' structure is unusually detailed, almost intimate. A calculated risk. Financial intelligence is our specialty, Mr. Reynolds. In a competitive market, due diligence extends to understanding potential counterparties. The attorney spoke for the first time. Your offer is compelling, but Cole Investments is threatening legal action if we breach our verbal agreement. A verbal agreement isn't binding, I countered smoothly. And our attorneys are prepared to defend. Any challenges? Reynolds exchanged glances with his daughter. We need to discuss this privately. We'll be in touch by end of day. Back at my office, I found multiple missed calls from Marcus. I returned his call with deliberate casualness. Hey, is everything okay? You called several times. Just checking. He replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. How's your day going? Busy with client meetings, I said truthfully. Is something wrong? You sound stressed. Nothing I can't handle, he answered. Dinner tonight? I thought we could try that new Italian place. Sounds lovely, I agreed. recognizing the invitation as an attempt to probe for information. "I'll meet you there at 7. After hanging up, I immediately called Zoe. "What's happening with Bryant Street?" "3 investors pulled out this morning," she reported, "and the bank is requesting additional collateral for the construction loan." The timing couldn't have been better. Marcus would be scrambling to salvage both Bryant Street and the Reynolds deal simultaneously, spreading his attention and resources thin. At 4:30 p.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. "Ms. Chen?" Catherine Reynolds' voice came through. "My father and I have reviewed your proposal. We'd like to move forward with Artemis Financial." "Excellent," I replied, signaling Zoe to activate our next phase. "Our attorneys will draft the paperwork immediately." "There's one condition," Catherine added. "We need to close within 21 days, not 30. Is that possible?" "Absolutely," I confirmed, knowing Eliza had already secured the financing. "We'll make it happen." At precisely 7 p.m., I arrived at Vincenzo's to find Marcus already seated, nursing a whiskey. The strain of the day showed in the tightness around his eyes. "You look beautiful," he said, standing to kiss my cheek. "Thank you," I smiled. "You look tired. Rough day?" "Nothing significant," he dismissed, though his knuckles whitened around his glass. "Just the usual complications of business." Throughout dinner, I watched him check his phone repeatedly, his tension mounting with each glance. "Is everything truly okay?" I asked with manufactured concern. "Fine," he snapped, then immediately softened. "Sorry, just some idiots trying to sabotage a deal." "That sounds frustrating," I sympathized. "Anyone I know?" "Some new financial group," he muttered. "Came out of nowhere." I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "You'll handle it." "You always do." His phone buzzed again. When he checked it, his face drained of color. "Marcus? What's wrong?" "I need to go," he said abruptly, throwing cash on the table. "Emergency with Bryant Street." "Of course," I nodded understandingly. "I hope everything works out." As he rushed out, I calmly signaled the waiter for another glass of wine. Phase 2 was complete. Reynolds had chosen Artemis, and Bryant Street was imploding. Now for Phase 3, the most delicate part of my plan. Marcus didn't return home that night. His text at 2 a.m. claimed he was working through the Bryant Street crisis with the investors, but Zoe's surveillance confirmed he'd spent hours at Kyle's house, frantically making calls. The next morning, I initiated Phase 3 with a call to Eliza. "It's time to approach the bank," I said. "Has Nathan prepared the documentation?" "Everything's ready," she confirmed. "But Rebecca, once we do this, there's no going back." "Marcus crossed that line when he started removing my name from our properties," I replied. "Proceed as planned." By noon, I was sitting across from Richard Harmon, vice president at Pacific Northwest Bank and the loan officer handling Marcus's various property finances. "Ms. Chen," he greeted me, glancing at my documentation. "I admit I'm confused about this meeting. These properties are under Cole Investments Management." "That's precisely why I'm here," I explained, sliding a folder across his desk. "I'd like to draw your attention to specific discrepancies in their loan applications." Harmon frowned as he reviewed the contents. "These documents suggest the Bryant Street project used funds allocated for other development properties, including Westlake," I added, "which has been refinanced twice in 18 months, with the capital disappearing." His eyes narrowed. "How did you obtain this information, Ms. Chen?" I placed a second folder on his desk. "My authorization as Rebecca Cole, co-owner of these properties. My husband removed my name without consent." The revelation visibly startled him. "You're Marcus Cole's wife?" "I am," I confirmed, "and I'm exercising my right to protect my interests in these properties." Harmon's demeanor shifted from suspicion to concern. "Mrs. Cole, if what you're suggesting is true, this could constitute loan fraud." "I'm aware," I replied calmly. which is why I'm requesting an immediate audit of all Cole Investments holdings with your institution. His expression was grave. This is a serious allegation against your husband. It's not an allegation, I corrected. It's documented evidence of financial impropriety. Your bank has significant exposure here, Mr. Harmon. The implied threat wasn't subtle. If the bank ignored these issues, they could be complicit. I'll need to consult with our legal department, he said finally. Of course, I nodded. I've prepared copies of everything for them. And Mr. Harmon? Time is of the essence. Back at my office, I found Zoe waiting with updates. The Reynolds contract is being finalized, she reported, and the Bryant Street investors are calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow. Perfect, I nodded. Has Marcus made any unusual financial moves? He attempted to access the Belize account. This morning, Zoe confirmed. But the authentication protocols have been temporarily disrupted. Another piece of my plan falling into place. Eliza's connections had ensured Marcus would face technical difficulties accessing his offshore funds. What about the other properties? I asked. 2 have pending sales transactions through Cole Investments, Zoe reported, both scheduled to close next week. I smiled. Just in time for our final move. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Business dinner tonight with Kyle and investors. Don't wait up. The perfect opportunity. Zoe, call the locksmith. It's time to secure the home office. That evening, while Marcus tried to salvage his crumbling investments over dinner, I supervised, as a locksmith installed a high-security lock on his home office door. Meanwhile, Zoe meticulously photographed every document inside before returning everything exactly as we'd found it. These will help with the audit, I explained, reviewing the images. Make sure Nathan receives copies tonight. After the locksmith left, I called Nathan to confirm our next steps. Pacific Northwest Bank has initiated an internal review, he reported. Their legal team contacted me an hour ago. And the Reynolds contract? Ready for signature tomorrow morning, Nathan confirmed. But Rebecca, Marcus is going to realize what's happening soon. Are you prepared for that confrontation? More than prepared, I assured him. In fact, I'm counting on it. When Marcus finally returned home at midnight, I was waiting in the living room, reading calmly. You're still up, he noted, his surprise tinged with suspicion. I was worried, I replied. You've been so stressed lately. How was your meeting? His smile was strained. Productive. We've found a solution for Bryant Street. Another lie. The project was beyond salvation. That's wonderful, I smiled. Everything's falling into place then? Marcus loosened his tie, studying me with newfound wariness. Yes, everything's proceeding as planned. Little did he know, but not according to his plan. The next morning I dressed with particular care, a power suit I rarely wore at home, subtle makeup, hair perfectly styled. When I entered the kitchen, Marcus was already there, staring at his laptop with increasing agitation. Everything okay? I asked, pouring coffee. He barely glanced up. Fine. Just some unexpected complications with a property. Anything I can help with? I offered innocently. No, he snapped, then moderated his tone. No, thank you. Business matters. I nodded, sympathetically. I understand. I'll be out most of the day with clients. His eyes narrowed slightly. Your consulting business seems busy lately. Just a few projects, I replied vaguely. Nothing too demanding. His phone rang. Kyle, according to the display. Marcus stepped onto the patio to take the call, his gestures becoming increasingly animated as the conversation progressed. I texted Zoe. Status update? Her response came immediately. Reynolds contract signed. Funds transferred to escrow. Bank audit underway. Perfect timing. I gathered my things and headed for the door just as Marcus returned inside, his face ashen. "Rebecca," he called, his voice unnaturally controlled. "Did you change the lock on my office?" I turned, the picture of confusion. "Your office?" "No, why would I do that?" "Someone did," he said, studying my reaction. "My key doesn't work." "How strange," I frowned. "Maybe the cleaner accidentally damaged it? I'll call the locksmith." "Don't bother," he said tersely. "I'll handle it." I smiled reassuringly. "Well, I'm off. Good luck with your property issues." The moment I reached my car, I called Nathan. "He's discovered the lock. How's our timeline?" "Bank auditors have already flagged 3 properties," Nathan reported. "They're freezing all related accounts pending investigation." "And the Reynolds closing?" "Completed 30 minutes ago. Artemis Financial is now the official owner." I smiled. "Time to accelerate. Meet me at the office in an hour with the final documentation." At my downtown office, I found Nathan waiting with Eliza and a woman I recognized as Jennifer Torres, lead investigator for the State Financial Regulatory Board. "Ms. Torres has some questions," Nathan explained, his expression grave. "Mrs. Cole," Torres began, "we've received concerning information about potential financial improprieties involving Cole Investments." I adopted a worried expression. "What kind of improprieties?" "Misappropriation of funds, falsified loan applications, and potentially fraudulent property transfers," Torres explained. "As co-owner of these properties, we need your cooperation." I nodded solemnly. "Of course. Whatever you need." For the next hour, I presented myself as the shocked, concerned wife discovering her husband's financial malfeasance. I provided selected documents, answered questions with calculated hesitation, and appeared increasingly distressed by each revelation. "I had no idea," I said finally, my voice cracking convincingly. "I trusted Marcus completely with our finances." Torres's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Cole, given the evidence, we'll be opening a formal investigation. You should prepare yourself for significant disruption." I dabbed at non-existent tears. "I understand. I just want the truth." After Torres left, Nathan turned to me with reluctant admiration. "Oscar-worthy performance?" "Necessary misdirection," I corrected. Torres needed to see me as a victim, not an orchestrator. "Well, it worked," Eliza confirmed. "The regulatory investigation gives us perfect cover for the final phase." My phone buzzed with multiple notifications, 3 missed calls from Marcus, 2 from his attorney, and a text. "We need to talk. Now." "He's discovered something," I noted. "Possibly the Reynolds deal or the bank audit." "Are you going home?" Nathan asked, concerned. "Not yet," I replied. "He's too volatile right now. Let him stew overnight." I checked the home security cameras through my phone. Marcus was pacing the living room, making frantic calls. The locksmith was working on his office door. "Zoe," I called to my assistant. "Contact security about changing the entry protocols at my condo downtown. I'll be staying there tonight." I texted Marcus. "Working late with clients. Don't wait up." His response was immediate. "Where are you? We need to talk about Reynolds properties." So that was it. He'd discovered Artemis had secured the Reynolds deal. I replied simply, "Can't talk now. In meetings. Home tomorrow." I turned to Nathan and Eliza. "Tomorrow we move to the final phase. Is everything prepared?" Eliza nodded. "All assets secured through Artemis. Bank records documented. Offshore accounts flagged." "And the house?" I asked. "Title search complete," Nathan confirmed. "The transfer removing your name was filed but never recorded due to a clerical error our contact at the registry discovered." I smiled. "Perfect. The board is set." I spent the night in my downtown condo, a property Marcus knew nothing about, purchased through my consulting business 5 years earlier. His messages grew increasingly desperate as the night progressed, evolving from demands to explanations, to finally, near dawn, thinly veiled threats. "Whatever you think you're doing, you're making a terrible mistake," read his final text. "I've built everything we have. Remember that." The irony wasn't lost on me. By morning, Zoe reported Marcus had called an emergency meeting with his attorneys. At their offices. Perfect timing. I arrived at our home precisely 30 minutes after Marcus had left, according to the security system's log. "The locksmith is waiting," Zoe informed me as I entered. "Have him remove the new lock," I instructed. "I want access to everything." While the locksmith worked, I called Nathan. "Is Torres ready?" "She's proceeding with the formal investigation today," he confirmed. "Bank records subpoenaed, property transfers flagged, and the offshore accounts frozen pending review." "And Marcus's attorney?" "Received the preliminary findings an hour ago. They're in crisis mode." Once the locksmith finished, I entered Marcus's office and began methodically photographing the updated contents. Several files were missing, likely taken to the emergency meeting, but his laptop remained on the desk, still logged in. "He left in a hurry," Zoe observed. "And made a critical mistake," I agreed, accessing his email. There it was, a frantic exchange with his attorney about Artemis Financial's sudden acquisition of the Reynolds property, the bank's freeze on coal investments accounts, and the regulatory investigation. The most damning email was from Kyle. "Reynolds confirmed the deal was signed by a woman named Chen. Your wife's maiden name is Chen. Coincidence?" Marcus's reply was telling. "Impossible. Rebecca knows nothing about finance or business structures. She's completely in the dark about everything." His fatal underestimation of me, captured in writing. I forwarded the entire exchange to my secure email before carefully returning everything to its original state. "Zoe, call the car service," I instructed. "It's time to meet Marcus at his office." 45 minutes later, I walked into the offices of Cole Investments for the first time. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition. "Mrs. Cole, I didn't know you had an appointment." "I don't," I replied calmly, "but I believe my husband is expecting me." Before she could respond, the conference room door opened, and Marcus emerged with Kyle and two men in suits, his attorneys, presumably. Marcus froze when he saw me. "Rebecca," he managed, his surprise quickly masked with forced cordiality. "This isn't a good time. We're in a meeting." "About the Reynolds property?" I asked innocently. "Or the bank audit? Or perhaps the regulatory investigation? Which crisis are you addressing first?" The color drained from his face. Kyle and the attorneys exchanged uncomfortable glances. "My office," Marcus said tersely, gripping my elbow to guide me down the hallway. Once inside with the door closed, his composure shattered. "What have you done?" he hissed, his voice vibrating with fury. I took a seat, smoothing my skirt calmly. "I've protected my interests, Marcus, just as you've been protecting yours." "What are you talking about?" "I know everything," I stated simply. "The property transfers removing my name, the offshore account in Belize, the plans to divorce me once the Reynolds deal closed." He stared, in disbelief, recalculating his perception of me in real time. "How could you possibly know?" I finished for him. "Because contrary to what you told Kyle, I understand finance quite well. I built most of our portfolio before I even met you." Realization dawned in his eyes. "Artemis Financial. That's you. Technically, it's a holding company with no direct connection to me," I corrected. "Just as your shell companies have no direct connection to you, except yours have been flagged for potential fraud." Marcus slammed his fist on the desk. "You've destroyed everything I've built." "Everything we built," I corrected. "Or, more accurately, everything I built that you tried to steal." His expression shifted from rage to calculation. "We can fix this. Together. Whatever you think I was planning, save it, I interrupted, standing to leave. Check your email. The state investigators will be here within the hour. I suggest you prepare yourself. As I reached the door, he called, after me, desperation creeping into his voice. Rebecca, don't do this. You'll get nothing if I go down. I turned, allowing myself a small smile. Actually, Marcus, I already have everything. You just don't know it yet. Sound Part 9. I maintained my composure until I reached the car, where Zoe waited with updates. Torres and her team arrived at the bank 10 minutes ago, she reported. Nathan says they've already pulled the loan documentation for Bryant Street. I nodded, watching Marcus's office building through the window. And the house? Our contact at the county records office confirmed your name was never successfully removed from the deed, Zoe replied. The error we discovered prevented the final recording. A small smile touched my lips. Perfect timing for a clerical error. My phone rang. Nathan. Rebecca, Torres is requesting your presence at Pacific Northwest Bank, he informed me. They're questioning Harmon about Marcus's loan applications. Tell her I'll be there in 20 minutes, I replied, signaling to the driver. At the bank, I found Torres interviewing Richard Harmon in a glass-walled conference room. Harmon's face was pale, his tie loosened. The picture of a man realizing his professional judgment had been severely compromised. Mrs. Cole, Torres greeted me, her expression professionally sympathetic. Thank you for coming. We have some questions about these loan applications. For the next hour, I played my role perfectly, the increasingly distressed wife discovering the extent of her husband's financial deceptions. Each document Torres presented prompted carefully calculated reactions of shock, confusion, and finally, tearful betrayal. I trusted him completely with our finances, I explained, voice trembling. I had no idea he was removing my name from properties or diverting funds offshore. Torres's assistant entered with a message. After reading it, Torres turned to me with renewed interest. Mrs. Cole, we've just received information that your husband is attempting to liquidate several properties immediately, including your primary residence. My genuine surprise must have been convincing. He can't do that. My name is still on the deed. Apparently, he's claiming the deed transfer was completed but not properly recorded, Torres explained. I frowned, allowing appropriate indignation to surface. That's impossible. I never signed any transfer. Torres exchanged glances with her colleague. We'll need to place a temporary freeze on all property transactions until we can verify the proper ownership. Of course, I agreed readily. Whatever you need to get to the truth. Back in the car, I called Eliza immediately. Marcus is trying to liquidate the house, I reported. How quickly can we secure it? The trust documents are ready, she confirmed. We just need your signature to transfer your legitimate interest into Artemis's protection. I'll be there in 15 minutes, I promised. At Winston Investments, I found Eliza waiting with legal documents prepared to shield my interests from Marcus's desperate maneuvers. Once you sign these, your portion of all joint properties will be protected by the irrevocable trust, she explained. Marcus won't be able to touch them, regardless of what happens with the investigation. As I signed, my phone buzzed repeatedly with calls from Marcus. I ignored them all. What's his next move likely to be? Eliza asked. He'll try to access the offshore accounts again, I predicted. When that fails, he'll approach Kyle or his other friends for emergency funds. Those friends may not be so friendly once they learn about the regulatory investigation, Eliza observed. I nodded. Exactly. Marcus is running out of options and allies simultaneously. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. M arrived home, appears agitated. Security system shows him searching office. Time to return home for the next confrontation, I said, gathering my things. Are you sure that's safe? Eliza asked, concerned. Marcus won't risk violence, I assured her. His entire strategy depends on maintaining his respectable image. Besides, I've already activated the home security system's recording features. As my car approached our neighborhood, I called Nathan for a final check. Torres has expanded the investigation to include all Cole Investments transactions for the past 3 years, he reported. The Bryant Street property has been officially flagged for loan fraud, and Marcus's professional licenses are under review. And the Reynolds property, officially recorded under Artemis Financial's ownership as of 3 hours ago, Nathan confirmed. The transfer is complete and irreversible. I smiled as we pulled into the driveway. Through the large front windows, I could see Marcus pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically. Perfect, I said, ending the EEC call and straightening my jacket. Now for the final confrontation. The pieces were all in place. Marcus's carefully constructed financial empire was collapsing around him, while mine was more secure than ever. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house, ready to face the man who had underestimated me for the last time. I entered our home with deliberate calm, the security system chiming softly to announce my arrival. Marcus stood in the center of the living room, his usual polished appearance noticeably disheveled, tie askew, hair rumpled from repeatedly running his hands through it. "Where have you been?" he demanded, abandoning any pretense of civility. "Meeting with investigators," I replied honestly, setting my purse down. They had questions about our finances. "Our finances," he repeated with bitter emphasis. Suddenly, "You're interested in our finances after years of leaving everything to me." I met his gaze steadily. "I've always been interested, Marcus. You just preferred to believe I wasn't." He paced the room like a caged animal. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The Reynolds deal was worth millions. Bryant Street would have transformed our portfolio. Now everything's frozen or under investigation. "Including the offshore account in Belize?" I asked innocently. "The one with $3 million I never knew existed?" He stopped pacing, reassessing, me with newfound wariness. "How did you find out about all of it?" I finished. "The same way I built our initial portfolio before I met you, through careful research, strategic planning, and attention to detail." His expression darkened. "You had no right to interfere with my business." "Your business?" I echoed, allowing indignation to color my tone. "The business built with my capital? The properties purchased with my initial investments? The ones you were systematically removing my name from without my knowledge?" His strategy shifted visibly, anger giving way to calculation. "Rebecca, you're not seeing the big picture. I was restructuring for tax purposes, protecting our assets, while consulting divorce attorneys," I interrupted, "while researching bachelor properties, while moving millions offshore." Marcus sank onto the sofa, running a hand over his face. When he looked up, his expression had transformed completely, remorseful, apologetic, the picture of contrition. "I've made mistakes," he admitted, his voice softening. "The pressure of maintaining our lifestyle, expanding the business. I took shortcuts I shouldn't have." I recognized the tactic immediately. Marcus at his most manipulative, using charm and apparent vulnerability to disarm opposition. "But we can fix this together," he continued, reaching for my hand. "You've obviously learned the business better than I realized. We'll make a formidable team moving forward." I withdrew my hand. "There is no forward for us, Marcus." His facade cracked momentarily. "Because of some property transfers? Some private accounts? Every successful businessman commits fraud?" I finished. "Lies to his wife? Plans to abandon her once he's stolen her assets?" The charm offensive evaporated instantly. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can," I countered calmly. "Your emails with the divorce attorney, your conversations with Kyle about timing my replacement, the systematic transfers removing my name from properties I purchased." Color drained from his face. You hacked my accounts. No need, I replied. You left your laptop open this morning. Careless under pressure. A fatal flaw in finance. Marcus stood abruptly, desperation replacing calculation. What do you want? Money. I can get it. Once this regulatory nonsense blows over. The house? Take it. But the business is mine. The business built on my initial capital, I reminded him. The one now under investigation for fraud. I'll recover, he insisted. Confidence returning. I always do. The Reynolds property was a setback, but I have other investors. Kyle will back me. Kyle's under investigation too, I informed him, as a co-signer on the Bryant Street loans. Then I'll find others. I'm Marcus Cole, he declared, as if his name alone could reverse his fortunes. I allowed myself a small smile. A name that's currently being flagged in every financial institution in Seattle. His phone rang. His attorney, according to the display. Marcus grabbed it like a lifeline. What do you mean, further complications? He demanded into the phone, pacing again. How can she... He stopped abruptly, staring at me with dawning comprehension. Artemis Financial is her company? The attorney's confirmation was audible even from where I stood. Marcus ended the call, his expression a complex mixture of fury, disbelief, and, most satisfying, reluctant respect. You're Artemis, he said flatly. I nodded once. Among other things. How long have you been planning this? Since the moment Nathan showed me the property transfers you claimed I had agreed to, I replied honestly. Marcus laughed without humor. All this time I thought I was the strategic one. A common miscalculation, I observed. One that's proven rather expensive for you. Marcus poured himself a generous whiskey, his third since our confrontation began. His initial shock had given way to desperate calculation as he tried to identify any remaining leverage. We can still salvage this, he insisted, pacing again. Reynolds was one property. We have others. Had others, I corrected gently. Most are frozen pending the fraud investigation. The rest are now legally protected in an irrevocable trust. He stopped mid-stride. What trust? The one I established this afternoon, I explained. My legitimate interest in all our joint properties is now legally separated from your potential liability. Marcus slammed his glass down. You can't do that without my consent. Actually, I can, I replied. Since my name was never successfully removed from most properties, I retained full legal right to protect my portion. His phone buzzed with a text. Whatever it contained drained the remaining. Color from his face. Kyle's dropping me from their firm's partnership, he muttered, almost to himself. Effective immediately. Self-preservation, I observed. The investigation is expanding to include all your business associates. Marcus collapsed onto the sofa, the magnitude of his situation finally sinking in. I'll be ruined. Professionally, yes, I agreed without malice. The regulatory violations alone will likely result in suspension of your licenses. The potential fraud charges are more serious. He looked up sharply. You'd let them arrest me? After 8 years of marriage? 8 years during which you plan to leave me destitute, I reminded him, while living off the investments I built. His phone rang again, another attorney, based on the contact name. Marcus ignored it. What do you want? He asked finally, defeat evident in his voice. I sat across from him, maintaining my composure. Originally, recognition of my contribution, respect for my financial acumen, basic honesty from my husband. Marcus flinched at the simplicity of these requests, reasonable expectations he'd systematically dismissed. And now? He asked quietly. Now, I want a divorce, I stated plainly. Clean, quick, and fair. Fair? He echoed with bitter laughter. You've destroyed everything. I've reclaimed what was mine, I corrected. The choice to destroy your career was entirely yours, Marcus. Each fraudulent application, Each misappropriation of funds, each deception, those were your decisions. The doorbell rang, unexpected, given the hour. Through the security panel, I saw Torres and two colleagues standing on our doorstep. That would be the investigators, I noted, standing to answer. Marcus grabbed my arm. Don't, please. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. They have questions about Bryant Street, I explained, gently removing his hand. The discrepancies between the loan applications and actual fund allocation. I can explain that, he insisted desperately. I believe that's what they're here for, I replied, moving toward the door. Rebecca, Marcus called, his voice breaking, slightly. If you ever loved me, I turned, studying the man I'd married 8 years ago, the charming, confident investment manager who'd swept me off my feet, only to gradually reveal his true character through countless small dismissals. And undermining comments? I did love you, I acknowledged. Enough to suppress my own abilities to make you comfortable. That was my mistake. When I opened the door, Torres greeted me with professional courtesy before turning her attention to Marcus. Mr. Cole, we have some questions regarding the Bryant Street development loan applications. Marcus straightened his tie, his public persona reasserting itself. Of course, happy to clarify any confusions. Perhaps we should continue this conversation downtown, Torres suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't optional. As Marcus gathered his phone and wallet, he turned to me one last time. This isn't over. Actually, it is, I replied quietly. I've already packed your things. Your mother called earlier. She's expecting you. His expression contorted with humiliation at this final indignity. My mother? She seemed concerned. I noted. Apparently, she's been receiving calls about your financial difficulties. Torres led Marcus toward the waiting car, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched from the doorway as the car pulled away, feeling neither triumph nor vindication, only a profound sense of reclaiming something essential I'd surrendered years ago. My identity, my worth, my power. Closing the door, I surveyed the home that was now truly mine alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, questions from friends, fallout from the investigation, rebuilding my public identity separate from Marcus's disgrace. But, for tonight, I simply savored the quiet and the knowledge that I had finally stopped pretending to be less than I was. Morning arrived with rain pattering against the windows, typical Seattle weather that matched my reflective mood. I sipped coffee in the kitchen that now felt distinctly mine, reviewing updates from Nathan. Marcus spent the night answering questions. He reported via text. No formal charges yet, but the investigation is expanding. His attorney requested a meeting with us today. I replied simply, schedule it for 2 p.m. at your office. After finishing my coffee, I walked through each room of the house, seeing it with fresh eyes. So many spaces designed to showcase Marcus's success, his awards prominently displayed, his preferences dictating the decor, his presence dominating even in absence. Time for change. I called a moving company to remove Marcus's remaining possessions to storage, then contacted an interior designer I'd long admired, but Marcus had dismissed as too avant-garde. By noon, Zoe arrived with lunch and updates. The regulatory board has suspended Marcus's investment licenses pending investigation, she reported. Pacific Northwest Bank is conducting a full audit of all his accounts, and 3 more investors have pulled out of Cole Investments projects. I nodded, unsurprised. Any word from Kyle or the others? They're distancing themselves publicly, Zoe confirmed. Kyle released a statement that his firm had limited involvement with Marcus's questionable transactions. Loyalty among thieves, as fragile as expected. What about Reynolds? I asked. Catherine Reynolds called this morning. Zoe smiled. She's impressed with Artemis Financial's efficiency and wants to discuss future collaborations. A small victory, but significant. Reynolds Properties represented not just a valuable acquisition, but validation of my business approach. At 1:30 p.m., I arrived at Nathan's office for the meeting with Marcus and his attorney. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a tailored navy suit that projected confidence without ostentation. Marcus was already there, sitting with an older attorney I recognized as James Whitman, one of Seattle's most expensive divorce lawyers. Marcus looked haggard, his usual polish diminished by stress and likely a sleepless night of questioning. "Rebecca," he acknowledged stiffly. "Marcus," I replied with professional courtesy. Nathan joined us, accompanied by Eliza, whose presence clearly surprised Marcus. "Ms. Winston is here as financial counsel," Nathan explained, noting Marcus's confusion. Whitman cleared his throat. "We've requested this meeting to discuss a swift resolution to the current situation." "The criminal investigation?" I asked innocently. "The matrimonial dissolution," Whitman corrected smoothly. "My client proposes an equitable division of assets to avoid prolonged litigation." I glanced at Marcus, whose expression remained carefully neutral. "I'm open to equitable terms," Whitman pushed a document across the table. "We've prepared an initial proposal." Nathan reviewed it first, his eyebrows raising slightly before passing it to me. The terms were surprisingly reasonable, almost generous compared to Marcus's previous machinations. "This is a significant shift from removing my name from our properties," I observed. "Circumstances have changed," Marcus replied, his first direct words to me. Indeed they had. With his professional reputation in tatters, accounts frozen, and possible criminal charges looming, Marcus was clearly seeking damage control. "There's also the matter of the Reynolds property," Whitman added. "We understand Artemis Financial is technically separate, but given the timing and circumstances, Artemis Financial is a legitimate business entity with no legal connection to our marital assets," Nathan interjected firmly. "Besides," I added, "the Reynolds acquisition occurred after Marcus initiated the separation of our finances without my knowledge." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "We're prepared to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding Mr. Cole's financial irregularities," Whitman offered, revealing their true concern. Marcus's public image. "The regulatory investigation is proceeding independently," I reminded them. "My discretion won't change that." Marcus finally spoke directly to me. "What do you want, Rebecca?" Such a familiar question, now asked from a position of weakness rather than contempt. "Exactly what this document outlines," I replied simply. "Fair. Recognition of my contributions and clean separation." The meeting concluded with tentative agreement on the divorce terms, significantly more favorable than anything Marcus would have offered voluntarily before his downfall. As we prepared to leave, Marcus asked for a moment alone. Against Nathan's concerned look, I nodded agreement. When the others had stepped out, Marcus faced me with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. "You orchestrated this perfectly," he said quietly. "I never saw it coming." "That was your fundamental mistake," I replied. "You never really saw me at all." 6 weeks later, I sat across from Catherine Reynolds in the downtown offices of Artemis Financial. The space, formerly an art gallery, reflected my aesthetic perfectly. Clean lines, modern furnishings, and walls showcasing local artists Marcus had dismissed as too experimental. "The development plans look excellent," Catherine said, reviewing the proposal for the Reynolds property. "My father is particularly impressed with the sustainability features. They'll increase initial costs by 12%, I acknowledged, but reduce operating expenses by nearly 30% over the first decade." Catherine smiled. "That's exactly the long-term thinking we were looking for. Cole Investments was focused solely on immediate returns." I nodded, accepting the implicit compliment without mentioning Marcus. His name had become toxic in Seattle's business community, a cautionary tale of hubris and fraud. The final divorce papers had been signed yesterday, a surprisingly straightforward process given Marcus's initial efforts to strip me of everything. His legal troubles had ensured his cooperation. Facing potential criminal charges, he couldn't risk antagonizing me further. By the way, Catherine added as we concluded our meeting, I mentioned Artemis to the Sorensen group. They're looking for new investment partners after the coal situation. I appreciate the referral, I replied professionally. The Sorensens had been among Marcus's most prestigious clients. Landing their business would be a significant achievement. After Catherine left, Zoe brought in coffee and the latest updates. The Bryant Street property is being auctioned next month, she reported, and Marcus's mother listed her house for sale. I raised an eyebrow. His mother's house? Zoe nodded. Apparently, she mortgaged it to provide his defense funds. The legal bills have been substantial. I felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but perhaps empathy. Marcus's fall had created collateral damage I hadn't anticipated. Send flowers to his mother, I decided, anonymously. Zoe looked surprised, but made a note without comment. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Plea deal offered. 18 months. Mostly probation. Full restitution to investors. Better than Marcus deserved, but typical for white-collar first offenders with expensive attorneys. The restitution would wipe out any remaining assets he'd managed to hide. The intercom buzzed. Ms. Chen, Kyle Wilson is here to see you. I hadn't expected this visit. Kyle, once Marcus's closest ally, had been among the first to publicly distance himself when the investigation began. Send him in, I instructed, curious about his purpose. Kyle entered cautiously, his usual swagger notably absent. Rebecca, thank you for seeing me without an appointment. What can I do for you, Kyle? I asked, not offering him a seat. He shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to apologize personally for my role in recent events. I had no idea Marcus was removing your name from properties, a convenient claim, contradicted by emails I'd discovered but chosen not to release. Is that all? I asked. Kyle cleared his throat. Actually, our investment group is considering new partnerships after severing ties with Marcus. Your work with the Reynolds property has been impressive. Of course, Kyle hadn't come to apologize. He'd come to salvage business relationships. I appreciate your interest, I replied neutrally, but Artemis is quite selective about partnerships. I'll review any formal proposal you submit. Kyle's expression revealed his surprise at not receiving an immediate welcome. Oh, of course. I'll have something prepared next week. After he left, I found myself smiling at the irony. The same men who had laughed at Marcus's jokes about my financial naivete were now seeking my professional consideration. That evening, I returned to the house, now redecorated to reflect my preferences, all traces of Marcus's presence removed. The latest issue of Seattle Business Monthly lay on the coffee table, featuring an article about Artemis Financial's innovative approach to sustainable development. There was no mention of my previous connection to Marcus Cole. My phone chimed with a text, Eliza, confirming our meeting tomorrow with potential investors. Another chime followed, Nathan, with news that the divorce was officially recorded. I stepped onto the patio with a glass of wine, watching the sunset over the Seattle skyline. The rain had cleared, leaving the air crisp and fresh. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new growth. But tonight was for quiet celebration. Not of Marcus's downfall, that had never been my primary goal, but of my own resurrection. The reclamation of the woman I had always been beneath the raw, accommodating mask I'd worn for years. Rebecca Chen was finally fully herself again. 1 year later, I stood at the edge of the rooftop garden atop the newly completed Reynolds Tower. The Seattle skyline stretched before me, the evening sun glinting off glass and steel. Below, guests mingled at the grand opening celebration. Investors, city officials, business leaders, and press. Quite a view, Robert Reynolds said, joining me at the railing. Catherine tells me the building is already 90% leased. 93 as of this morning, I confirmed. The sustainability certifications attracted several major tech companies. He nodded appreciatively. I must admit, when you first approached me about Artemis Financial, I had reservations. A new company with limited public history. Understandable, I acknowledged. But Catherine insisted we look deeper, he continued. She recognized something in your approach. She was right. A server approached with champagne. As I accepted a glass, I noticed a familiar figure entering the rooftop space. Nathan, accompanied by Eliza. Excuse me. I smiled at Reynolds. My advisors have arrived. As I crossed the rooftop, I caught fragments of conversation. Praise for the building's design, comments about Artemis Financial's meteoric rise, whispered mentions of Marcus Cole's absence from the business world. Impressive turnout, Nathan observed as I reached them. The mayor just arrived. And the Sorensens, Eliza added. Their partnership has exceeded projections. I nodded, surveying the gathering. So many connections forged in just 12 months. Any word about Marcus? Nathan hesitated. He completed his community service last week. The probation continues for another 6 months. I heard he's working for a small investment firm in Portland, Eliza added. Entry-level position, given. The licensing restrictions. The news brought no satisfaction, only a sense of closure. Marcus's punishment had never been my objective, only reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Ms. Chen? A young reporter approached, notepad in hand. Jessica Winters, Seattle Business Journal. Could I ask a few questions about Artemis Financial's remarkable first year? I gave Nathan and Eliza a small nod before turning to the reporter. Of course. You've established one of the fastest-growing investment firms in the region, she began. What do you attribute your success to? Clear vision and transparent operations, I replied. We approach each project with long-term sustainability in mind, financial, environmental, and social. And your background? You seemed to emerge fully formed on the Seattle business scene. I smiled slightly. I've been in finance for 15 years, though much of my earlier work was behind the scenes. Any connection to Marcus Cole? She asked. Directly. Some sources suggest you had professional dealings before his legal troubles. The question I'd been anticipating for months. My prepared answer was deliberately vague, acknowledging the past while avoiding details that might generate unwanted publicity. Mr. Cole and I crossed paths professionally, I acknowledged. But Artemis Financial has always operated independently. The VI reporter seemed poised to press further, but Catherine Reynolds approached, providing a timely interruption. I'm sorry to intrude, she said smoothly. But the mayor is asking to speak with Ms. Chen before his address. As we walked away, Catherine murmured, The press never stops digging. Let them dig, I replied calmly. There's nothing to find beyond what's already public. The evening proceeded with speeches, tours of the building's innovative features, and numerous business cards exchanged. By the time the last guests departed, the sky had darkened to reveal a canopy of stars over the city lights. I remained on the rooftop alone, reflecting on the journey of the past 18 months. From the shock of discovering Marcus's betrayal to the methodical reclamation of my financial identity, each step had led to this moment. My phone chimed with a text, an update from Zoe about tomorrow's meetings with international investors. Another chime followed, a news alert mentioning Artemis Financial in a feature about women-led companies transforming Seattle's business landscape. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and gazed once more across the cityscape. Marcus had sought to erase me from our financial empire, believing I would remain ignorant and compliant. Instead, he had inadvertently freed me to create something entirely my own, something stronger, more ethical, and ultimately more successful than anything we had built together. The irony would not be lost on him. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass doors, confident, poised, unapologetically powerful. Rebecca Chen, finally and completely herself.